You're listening to the What's Happening podcast with Gary Watts.
I'm excited this morning to have Jordan Montgomery here from the Montgomery companies. It's been a while, but we got you here. Good morning. How are you?
Good to be here, Gary. Thanks for having me. And I've been following this podcast, and I've seen you've had Jim Connard and Kelly Hayworth, and so honored to share a conversation with you.
I'm
This
glad
is
I
fun.
got at least one followed it.
Yeah. Hey, this is great. Love what you're doing.
No, I'm glad you could make it. So let's start out this morning and tell us about your journey. I mean, a lot of times on a podcast, I want people to tell us about where they start, where'd they come from, where did you get the ideas from Montgomery companies? So it's a free reign right now. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about some things that people may not know about Jordan Montgomery.
Well, we were joking offline that you don't often talk about yourself.
Right. You don't.
So
where do you get a chance?
Yeah, you don't, right?
Yeah,
And being a gifted leader and communicator, you got to stay others focused, and you make it about the people you're with. So, but to answer your question, I grew up in Kelowna, Iowa. So a lot of this, of course, but son of a blue collar business owner and a teacher. My mom was a teacher. Dad was a blue collar business owner.
Painter.
Yeah, painting contractor.
Great painter.
So I knew from a really young age, Gary, I wanted to run a business someday because I looked at the way my dad spent his time. And his business wasn't fancy, but the one thing I really valued about my dad is that he could always be present for all of our activities. He was always at every game. He was at every activity. In other words, he lived his life by design and had some autonomy. And so I thought, well, I want to be like my dad. I'm going to own a business. And I don't necessarily care what business. I just want to control my time and do work that matters. And so I got out of college. I went to the University of Iowa, and I got out of college, and I realized real quick I had no money and no experience or knowledge.
Hang on a second. Let's go back to high school.
Yeah.
What sports?
Basketball. Yeah, basketball, football, track. So didn't play baseball in the summer, but I was a 3-sport athlete. Went to Mid-Prairie High School.
Mid-Prairie. Who was the basketball coach there?
Don Showalter.
Don's
legendary
fantastic
basketball coach. Yeah. Now he's with USA Basketball, and just he had a real big impact on my life.
Didn't he coach with John Wooden?
Coach with John Wooden, Coach K, Calipari. I mean, he's a legend. It's amazing he was there for 26 years.
Yeah, at Mid-Prairie.
At Mid-Prairie High School.
Great school.
In fact, there was a commercial came out of the Final Four, and it was Coach K at Duke, Mike Krzyzewski, Calipari at Kentucky, and Don Showalter. Yeah. And so Don's done such a great job of building relationships and adding value, and he's deserved every ounce of where he's at. But what I love about Don is he never forgot where he came from. He had enough humility to stick with it at Mid-Prairie and then City High after that. And so he had a huge impact
with
on
your
my life.
Sports in high school, what'd you learn from sports? Do you still think about that 2 minutes of a game, or
I do.
Practices and the discipline, the teamwork, the hard work? Tell us about what you remember about high school sports.
First off, such a special time in life. You get to play with your best friends, the kids you grew up with. And, I think one of the things that sports taught me, maybe the primary lesson, is how to lose. We're watching March Madness right now.
Right.
And basketball is a unique sport. College basketball is a unique sport because almost every team ends on a loss.
Right.
Football, you go to a bowl game. Other sports can be a little bit different, but basketball, you're likely going to end your season on a loss.
Right.
And the emotions are super high. And we just saw it last night. I was watching the Louisville, Texas game, and I don't even know what happened, Gary, but somebody said something to somebody in the exchange, in the line, giving handshakes.
Oh boy.
And there was a big uproar. And so the point is this: there's a lot of folks in life that have never lost, don't know how to lose, or deal with disappointment or failure. Now, I've learned a thing or two about that since high school, but high school was my first experience with loss and disappointment. How do you handle adversity when things don't go your way?
Right.
I had a mentor. He'd always say you can tell a lot about a person watching them play hurt. And he didn't mean physically hurt. He meant emotionally hurt, relationally hurt. When things don't go your way, how do you respond? And so a lot of lessons I learned from sports, but if I could say, hey, here's maybe the primary lesson, it was how do you deal with circumstances when they don't go your way?
Because they're not always going to go your way.
That's right.
Absolutely. Well, that's an interesting one. Anyway, I just wanted to not skip over high school.
No, I love that. It's an important time in life and a fun time in life. Just a bunch of great years.
I'll say something to Becky like, hey, I remember that 4th and 2. And we were trying, she'll go, where do you keep all this mindless stuff in your brain? And I go, I don't know.
Isn't it funny how it just never leaves you?
No,
sometimes I don't know where I put my wallet, but I can tell you about 4th and 2 from, the glory days. So
anyway, so you're in college.
I'm in college, went to the University of Iowa.
Okay.
Got involved in an entrepreneurial program. Had a great experience at the University of Iowa. Great teachers. I had a great group of friends. but I kind of went to college as if it was a social experiment. Because again, I wanted to run a business. I thought, well, look, I'll get a degree, I'll meet a bunch of great people, and then I'm going to start my business. Got out of school, realized I didn't have any knowledge, experience, or money. So I had to find an opportunity where I could still have some autonomy and build something special, but I could be in business, by myself, but for myself, but have some support. And I found that with a financial services firm. So I go to work building a financial services practice and loved it. Loved the work, got to meet with people day in, day out. I've always been a talker, so love to talk, love to listen, love to build relationships. And it was some of that was hard work meets opportunity. But when I was 25, I became the youngest in my role inside that company. And and you knew me then, Gary, and you might have even identified me this way. But who I was is I was overexposed and I was underdeveloped. And so my life took off pretty fast. And all of a sudden I was out front and I was leading and teaching and speaking and training. And so I had influence that my character wasn't keeping pace with.
Well, you had goals, right?
But I had goals.
Because the exciting thing about what you're telling me is most kids go to college just to get through. They're kind of being told, well, you got to have a 4-year degree or 5 or whatever it takes, to get a degree.
Yep.
You have to get that. But most kids don't want to be entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs kind of like, that's out there. It's scary. Yep. So right there, you're kind of a rare person that is wanting something extra. So talk a little bit before we get into more of the story. Tell us more about what drove you to be an entrepreneur. What were your goals? What were you trying to accomplish when you were younger, just out of college and just starting out?
I just always had this desire to create and to build. I wanted to build something. I think some of that came from my dad. I watched my dad build stuff, build a business. And again, it wasn't fancy, but I admired the fact that if he worked harder, he got paid for it.
So it's kind of like the American dream.
It is.
We've got so far away from the American dream.
Yeah.
And we need to get back there. That's what our country was founded on, is going out and getting something, making something happen, building something.
That's right.
Employing people, making it work for everybody, not just yourself.
Yeah.
Not just yourself, for everybody. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
That's right.
But I'm just thinking of things. So anyway, you're started out.
Yeah.
And you're an entrepreneur and you're working.
And I'm working. And I worked through college. I worked all through college. I always had a full-time job and went to school and loved that. In fact, sometimes I would skip class to go work, which wasn't always good. But I'm working and I'm building this financial services team and practice. And at 27 years old, I get a text from my boss at the time. He said, I need to meet with you. And of course, I was naive and, I get a busy schedule. And so I remember responding back. I said, actually, I'm too busy. I can't meet with you. We're going to have to move to next week or find a different time. And he said, well, this is the type of meeting where you clear your calendar. And I thought, oh, wow. I mean, somebody must have really done something stupid or silly. Somebody, wasn't me, but somebody else must have messed up and I got to go handle it. And so I walked into his office a short time after that, cleared the calendar. And the first thing he said to me, Gary, he said, you haven't done anything malicious or intentional, but you've been careless and casual. And when you're casual, you create casualties. And today's going to be your last day at our firm. You're the casualty. And he was professional about it. He was kind about it, but he's basically telling me you're going to be done here. And there's a couple of things that happened. The big one though was somebody on my team had taken a test on my behalf. I didn't report it like I should have. And while it didn't get in the way of clients, affairs, I was just running really fast. And I think he saw a young kid that wasn't dotting the I's, wasn't crossing the T's. Again, I knew my goals, but I didn't know my values. And if you know your goals, but not your values, your goals can take you to a place that you never intended to go. So I was working 14 hours a day. I'd work the weekends. And my life just became achievement, status, success, money. I mean, that just controlled me. It had a grip on my heart and it was just driving every decision that I made, the people I spent time with. And pride's a scary thing because you don't always know it's there, but it was there.
Well, the good thing about this, when I'm listening to you, is you have the guts to admit it. Because we all make mistakes. We've all done things we regret. We've all done things as we're growing up the ladder. But you got the guts to say, you know what, I did some things that maybe I shouldn't have.
Yeah.
You own up to it. But look how you've grown. Now take off from there and then tell us how difficult that was and then how you grew from that experience.
Yeah, I go into this sort of 2-year desert season, Gary. I had a guy by the name of Tim Bohannon step into my life. He said, hey, why don't you come work for me? Same firm. So I moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota. But he said, this is how it's going to work. You're not going to speak. You're not going to coach. You're not going to train. You're just going to work on yourself and you're going to rebuild your life. He gave me a corner office with an assistant. I'll tear up if I spend too much time talking about Tim, but he just was radically generous.
Wow.
And then he'd sit down with me and we'd visit about life and values and goals. And you know, about 30 days, first 30 days with Tim, I would vent and complain. Well, this is so unfair and I got screwed and, you know, this never should have happened this way. So like any good leader, he listened for a while. And then about 30 days, he said, I'm done listening. He said, there's a question you need to start asking yourself. And the question is, what part of the problem is me?
Ooh, you got to look at yourself.
You got to look at yourself. And whether you're 5% of the problem or
Right.
95% of the problem, you're part of the problem.
Right.
And you need to start asking that question.
Wow.
So I did. And in that process, Gary, it's like God started doing things in my heart. And I started asking for feedback. I, for the first time in my life, became a little bit more coachable. Started praying. I remember sitting in my closet, Minneapolis, Minnesota, with my Bible open. You know, I said I believed all my life, a person of faith, but I never really went to the scriptures to check out what God had to say or the story of Jesus. I wasn't really that familiar.
So you had faith before this.
I had faith before
But this really tested your faith.
Oh, really tested my faith. Yeah. And you know this, like God does his best work in our valleys.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, here I am broken, lost money, influence, status, but I'm growing in my faith and God's doing a great work in my life. About 18 months into that journey, I met a gal named Ashley, and she had 2 kids from a previous marriage, Audrey and Claire. We have 4 kids today together.
Great.
Audrey and Claire are my 2 oldest. So been such a cool story of how our lives came together. She was coming out of a really awful divorce. I was coming out of a really awful, you know, financial situation, professional. Right. So we meet in this place of total brokenness. But God, I think he had to do something in me before he could do something with me. Knew that, hey, you're going to be a father and a husband. You're about to step into the best leadership opportunity of your life.
True.
But if you don't get this right with your decision-making and your values and your pride, you're not going to be able to lead those kids and lead in the home. And so anyway, I meet Ashley. God puts things back together. I look at Ashley one day. I'm still running this financial planning business. I said, I think I could get back into coaching and speaking. What if we just open a little business and let's just see what happens? Well, 5 clients became 10, 10 became 20. Today, we get to work with thousands of clients all over and professional athletes and salespeople and executive leaders. And God's just blessed it. Doesn't make any sense. But I will say this. This is important because 3 years into that journey, I'm speaking and training, but I'm not talking about what I went through yet, at least not in a real honest way. I'm not able to talk about that, own that.
Not publicly.
It's still too, the wound is still there.
Yeah.
I'm driving to Madison, Wisconsin one day. And it's like God came out of the sky, said, you're going to tell your story today. And I was supposed to be talking about effective communication that day. And I remember kind of fighting God on that. Like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't know.
Tough.
But I said, okay, I'm going to trust you. And I'm praying. And so I get to this event. Okay, here goes nothing. I haven't really talked about this publicly. There's 500 people in the audience. And I go for it. I said, maybe this will help somebody today. And I'm telling you, Gary, it was the worst talk I'd ever given. I mean, it was bad. I was fumbling through it. I start crying. At one point, I had to walk off the side of the stage, kind of collect myself. I got halfway through that. I thought, God, why would you have me do this? This was awful. This is the worst talk I've ever given. I don't know why I decided to trust you with this, but I got done. I'm off to the side of the stage. And for the first time, I realized that it's better to be impactful than impressive. And I had this line of people ready to talk, and they didn't want to talk like, hey, good job, or here's the thing I took away. It was like, hey, I'm going through something. You know, one lady said, my son was just diagnosed with cancer. Another person says, I'm going through a really rough divorce, and your vulnerability, your story really touched me. And so I just decided on that day, I thought, you know what? I'm going to own my story. If you deny the story, it defines you. If you own the story, you can write a brand new ending. And what I've learned about humans is we all make mistakes. We all mess up. So many people aren't willing to say, well, part of the problem is me,
right,
and own what they went through. There's a right time to do that. I'm not saying we should just walk around and air out all our dirty laundry, right. But I am saying if you allow, the scripture says in Corinthians, God's power is made perfect in my weakness. And so if I'm going to be an ambassador and an advocate for God and for my Lord and my Savior, then I got to be willing to say, here's what God did in my life. It's not like I bounced back and I'm so great. He met me in my brokenness and in my weakness, and he changed my life. And so,
when you were in Madison, who were you speaking to? What was your group?
a financial firm. Yeah.
Just a financial firm. So they're there to motivate them, and then you get up and you're kind of telling your story.
Yeah.
But look, you reached way more people that way.
Yeah.
Because everybody's got a story. We just never take the time as normal people to talk to them about their story. It's like you're having lunch. Whoever talks to a waitress or a waiter and says, "How you really doing?" Just say, "Hey, how are you?" But just think if you just took an extra 15 seconds to, no, really, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Is there anything I can help you with? Just stuff like that. You'd be surprised, just like those folks after your session, or cancer, they may be going through a bad divorce. Everybody's got heartache, and life's not easy.
Yeah.
I think it's so cool that you were touched in order to come up, to let people know, hey, I'm not infallible. I had issues, and now look what I'm doing about it.
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic. I think it's amazing. I'm glad. I'm just so excited you did it.
And I know that you know this in your leadership journey. I think especially in today's culture, because we got a fast-paced world that can be really fake and artificial. Social media makes it harder every day. And I love what my friend Craig Groeschel says. He says, people would rather follow a leader who's always real than one who's always right.
Right.
Give me the person who's real and authentic and down to earth.
I was just thinking, one of the guys that works for me, we went to high school together and played ball together. We were laughing about if we'd had Facebook and Instagram back then, it would have been way different.
Yeah.
And I feel
changed the world.
I mean, anybody does anything. I think of young kids, and it's just awful what they put out there.
Yeah.
Hard to overcome it. So you spoke in Madison, and then you started down a road of sharing more of your story, and it was 3 years after things happened, right?
Yeah.
So you'd left your mentor. Was it Tim?
Yep, Tim. Yeah, no longer working for Tim.
Tim, and
Tim,
you're
Tim
on your
moved
own.
he blessed my move back to Iowa. I told Tim, hey, Tim, I met this gal, lives in Iowa. She got 2 kids. I'd sort of made a 5-year handshake deal with Tim, but he was so gracious, say, hey, go pursue Ashley, start a family.
Great.
Even showed up to our wedding.
Wow.
So,
I'd like to meet this guy.
Yeah, he's just
He's
unbelievable leader and just an incredible human. So then I started to realize, hey, I think vulnerability and authenticity is going to have to be part of our brand, because I'm having this revelation that the more I talk about all the ways that I've screwed up, the more influence and the more favor God continues to give us. It's like he started working through the brokenness in a really significant way. And I always tell people, like, I didn't even play college sports. I was a decent athlete in high school. I didn't play college sports. We get to work with all these athletes. I get a call here in a little bit with a Pro Bowl NFL lineman, and there's nothing about me that's impressive. I don't have any merit. In other words, I didn't earn, there's no reason I should be in that environment, other than I've learned that if you're real and you connect with people and you talk about things that matter, and people sense that you have a heart of humility, man, I think sky's the limit. And especially in today's world where things can be really fake and artificial. So I'd love to tell you that I have, all these great ideas about leadership and communication. I'm a pretty ordinary guy from Kelowna, Iowa. But I think God's blessed the path. And I think the more we've talked about our shortcomings, the more opportunity there's been to reach people.
We'll go back to Kelowna. I think that's another cool thing. Small town, hard work, values. And I tell people, I like Iowans. I've been here my whole life. I may come and go to Hawaii, to other areas. But you know what? I come back to Iowa. Good people, solid people, hardworking. It's just a good place to be. It's a good place to raise your family. So tell us about your wife and kids a little bit. You came together, you got married.
Yeah.
And then what was your first date? How did you guys get together?
Because we kind of knew each other in college.
Oh, you did?
And then sort of, I was back in town and I knew she had gone through a rough time. And so we kind of reconnected, asked her on a date, mustered up some courage, asked her on a date. We met at, where'd we go for our first date? Was at Red's Ale House, North Liberty.
Yeah. One
thing led to another. Unique situation for me because she had kids. And I thought, there's no way I'll ever step into that situation.
Right.
But that's, it's a plan God had for us. And I got to step into a family, at a really unique time in my life. And so it was just this amazing blessing. So I'm learning about being dad, and not right away, of course. I mean, it was a few months before I got to meet the kids. And then, we got engaged and married, and, but we live in Tiffin, and, my wife runs a business. I run my mouth. So we're in business together.
Right.
Most days it works. Some days it doesn't. 18 people on the team. Our kids are involved in dance. But like you, Gary, we love Iowa. I get the question all the time. You probably get this sometimes. Somebody says, why'd you choose to live there? You could live other places. And a lot of our work is not here. I mean, I travel a lot. Good people. Our family's here.
Right.
It's where I'm from. I'm just really proud. And I'm proud to be from here.
Right.
And unless God tells us he wants us to live somewhere else, this is where we're going to be.
We get a lot of real estate questions. A lot of people coming into town. I'm always going, why'd you come back? Why do you come to Iowa City other than the hospitals and the U of I and things? I'm coming back. I want to be by my grandkids. I want to be by my family. And they want to come back to that Midwestern roots. Yeah. They want to be back here. And we're seeing people getting out of the inner cities, the big cities, and they're coming back to the Midwest, coming back to Madison, Minneapolis, Iowa City. It's kind of interesting.
It's great. Yeah.
It's coming back.
Cost of living's low. You don't deal with traffic. I mean, opportunity is present. I mean, you can start anything, go. I mean, so and you have access. Like I, at a young age, I mean, I was able to learn from you, be around you. We were in a Bible study together at Parkview Church. And so I was able to be close to people that I really respected and admired. I think in a big city, I'm not sure you have that same proximity or opportunity.
So you started out with a little company, Montgomery Companies, and you're going to coach, you're going to teach, whatever. So tell us about your goals there, and then tell us how it's grown and what you do on a daily basis or weekly or monthly. And what do you try to do with the Montgomery Companies?
Yeah, so almost all of our work, Gary, is rooted in leadership development and organizational health. So if somebody says, tell me about what you do, it's really that. It's helping leaders develop, and it's helping cultures and organizations become healthier. So that takes shape in a variety of ways. We do individual coaching, group coaching, do a fair bit of keynote speaking. I'll speak probably 100 times this year. Half those times will be virtually, half those times will be on site, which requires some travel. And then we built out a team. So there's 18 of us total. We have coaching partners and then keynote speakers. So, we send speakers to a lot of different events. I'd say most of our work today is with people who are in the people business. So it's realtors, financial advisors, fair bit of entrepreneurs. And now we started to do a lot more work in the world of sports, but we're having a blast. And the work is pretty similar across the board. I mean, it's soft skills, it's emotional intelligence, it's effective communication, it's self-awareness. I mean, it's a lot of those topics that help people regardless of what industry or field of work, line of work you're in.
Every company needs company needs refreshing. Leaders need. Right. One of the hardest things that I've seen in my lifetime is being a leader. That's something you really can't teach. You got to work at it. Talk about the leaders that you've been around and mentored with, like Maxwell, and we talked about John Gordon's coming into town, the energy bus. Yeah. Talk about some of the people that you've really been influenced by and has helped you on your journey.
Well, I do think, so much of who you become is the people that you spend time with, and for a long time, it's fun. I've always believed in the power of the far off mentor or the far away mentor. In today's world where you have YouTube and social media, you can learn from anybody. Right. So I've long told people, hey, John Maxwell's been a mentor of mine, even, going back 10, 12 years ago. But yeah, John's become a dear friend. I've been able to interact with him, shared the stage a few times. He's been really generous and abundant with his time and energy. Just spent 2 days with him in Orlando, and he poured into a group of leaders. What I love about John Maxwell is just so abundant. It's all about others. He always says success is about us, significance is about others. And he truly means it. He walks his talk. So it's been great learning from John. John Gordon's become a real dear friend. Spent a lot of time with John. John he's known as the positivity guy. Yeah. But I love what John says. He says, I'm not positive because life is easy. I'm positive because life is difficult. Right. And so we want to bring great energy to the world because people are struggling. And I've watched John do that in so many unique situations.
He chooses to be positive. One negative thought, it takes 10 positives to counteract that.
That's right.
And in society, I don't know if you watch TV, but I try not to. One of my friends said, instead of watching the news, why don't you watch Andy Taylor and Opie and Barney, instead of something that's kind of funny.
That's right.
As opposed to just, you turn the TV on, it's floods, it's shoot. I mean, it's just usually not positive stuff. And so where do you get some positive energy? And a guy like Gordon, if you read his books, and you just listen to what he's saying. It's simple, but it's very difficult to do.
Yeah,
And it's something you have to do daily.
that's right.
I think Maxwell, you talk about John Maxwell, I read some of his books. He was an old basketball coach, I think.
Well, coach basketball, he's a pastor.
Right.
So John's life, I mean, he didn't really take off till he was well into his 40s.
Uh-huh.
I mean, he was really talented. He was communicating with a lot of folks, but he really didn't become the author, leader, well-known communicator until he was much, much later in life.
So back to the Montgomery companies, do you see yourself when you get out of a speaking engagement, you enjoy it, right? I mean, do you get fired up for it?
I do enjoy it. You know, it's like you walking into a big deal or big, you know, you got to have a certain level of energy around that or enthusiasm, or you're not going to be who you need to be for the people you're speaking to.
And then do you spend a lot of time with the crowd and get to know them and hear their issues, or how do you do that after you speak?
Well, going back to John, I'll never forget one time before we're speaking, I'm having a conversation with John. You know, John, what are you thinking about before you speak? And you know, how are you thinking about your preparation? And all my questions were focused on John focusing on John, or me, you know, me focused on me. What am I going to do? What am I going to say? He said, well, I'm not thinking about me. I'm thinking about the audience. You know, a gifted communicator isn't thinking about themselves. They're thinking about what's this audience need? What's the temperature of the room? What's the atmosphere? What's the environment? What are they dealing with? I need to put myself in their shoes. And so before I speak, I'm trying to think about what's the audience need? What's the temperature of the room? What's this culture organization dealing with? And how am I going to resonate and connect with these people? And we'll do that so much so that sometimes it actually changes the content. So sometimes you have to pivot and be willing to say, hey, I was planning on talking about this. I was going to give these points, but based on what I'm feeling and experiencing, I think I need to go a different direction. And for anybody who communicates publicly, this is just critical. I've learned this. You have to get in the room and be with the organization before you communicate. If you just try to show up, you know, if I've never talked to anybody in the organization, I just try to take a stage, I'll never be very effective because I haven't listened. I don't really know them and what they're dealing with. And so I've just learned the preparation is everything when it comes to being effective with an organization.
So you're working with leaders. Tell us a little bit about the coaching thing. You had a football team in Arkansas, right?
Yeah.
That you did speaking or motivational speaking or worked with the athletes. Tell us more exactly what you did in that situation.
It was really my first in the world of sports. Guy by the name of Nathan Brown. He's the second youngest Division I coach.
Really?
And he gave me an opportunity. In fact, I just went down there to camp to speak to his team at a camp. He was a friend of a friend. We got connected. He said, hey, come speak to my guys at training camp. So I did that. And they said, well, would you come back again? And what if we worked together like for a year? Would you give me a season and come back to a few more games, do the locker room speech, mentor some of the guys? So I said yes to that. Nathan has been incredible. I mean, he's opened doors for me, made introductions. He trusts me with the guys, trusts me with, you know, his most important relationships. So I'd go down and give the pregame speech in the locker room, which is a totally different environment than I remember we're playing Western Kentucky. I'd never been in a locker room like that. I played high school sports, but I was used to speaking in the boardroom and in the you know, the hotel ballroom. And you walk in and you're in front of a bunch of D1 football players and they're getting ready to take the field, and you got 2 minutes to give them something that matters.
Right.
And so that's been really fun. Right. And Nathan's been great. So, but that really kind of spurred our work in the world of sports. That was my first, and I've always believed this: you never forget about the people who gave you your first opportunity. Right. You want to honor the people who helped you get to where you're at. And Nathan Brown, coach at UCA, Central Arkansas, he gave me that opportunity. And so I'm always going to have a different relationship with Nathan than I do with other people because he opened the door to do work in that world.
So you have other coaches that contact you, other players? Is that, you said your next phone calls with a lineman?
Yeah, we're doing some work with the Jaguars, USA basketball. I've done some work with the Iowa basketball team. Just on the phone this morning with the guy from Ohio State. So just all of a sudden, again, God has just opened doors, and one thing leads to another, you know? So
I remember the Iowa basketball. You invited me out to Fran's house.
Yeah.
And it was so neat because you introduced me to, I think, Peyton Sanford. And I didn't know him. I mean,
I remember that.
I'm like, you know, I hadn't really followed some of these guys. I knew the McCaffreys and whatnot, but it's such a nice talk, such a nice gentleman, young man. And I thought it was cool that the players would sit and talk to some of the other folks that were there, just one-on-one, and get to know them personally, as opposed to, you know, a star athlete, and here's where I came from. I had a ball with that because I'd never really been able to speak to them. I mean, I never talked to the young men, and it was
and you're so good.
amazing.
One of your superpowers is is asking questions and
Yeah.
making people feel valued and important. I remember that. We sat, me, you, Becky, and Peyton sat at that table together in McCaffrey's backyard.
Right.
And you asked Peyton one question after another,
Right.
and you made him feel important.
Good. And it's just amazing watching him. And now when I watch basketball, I remember talking to him. So that's neat. So you're kind of a connector. Tell us more about that with the Montgomery companies. I know you got motivational speaking. You're talking to leaders and trying to understand their leaders and motivate leaders.
Yeah.
You've talked to football teams. Talk about connections, because I know on your website, when you look at it, you're talking about you make connections and you get people together.
Yeah.
How do you work that through your company?
Well, I've always believed one of the greatest gifts we could give to somebody is a relationship, and so we're trying all the time to advocate on behalf of our clients to connect them, help them expand their circle, get introduced to, maybe it's a mentor, a partner, a friend, a client. And so, I learned from a lot of people like John Maxwell and John Gordon how to do that well. Connecting people are connected people. So many young people want to get more connected. How do I get connected? And how do I get in the room? And I just say, start connecting. If you want to be a connected person, just start connecting people. People track how many referrals they get in business. How many do you give? I mean, are you going out of your way to put people in the same room? Are you inviting them to, say, hey, you need to go grab coffee with this person because you can share a lot in common. There's something about your energy and the way that you're wired. I just think you're really going to enjoy getting to know each other. And it doesn't have to be that there's some special deal, that they're working on. It's not like you got to connect the real estate agent with the buyer. You just start connecting people who are interesting and share some stuff in common. And we've just done that on a pretty consistent basis for a long time. And you wake up after a while, you go, wow, you end up with a bigger network and a few more friends when you start adding value and connecting people. So there's no magic to it other than, our mutual friend Tom Seelick is so good at that.
He's done it for years.
Just done it for years.
He gets everybody together. When
and
Tom calls, you just show up.
You go. Yeah, because it's going to be good.
Yeah.
And he adds value. And
Right.
you look at Tom's one of the most connected people I know,
Yeah.
just because he's added so much value over the years.
It's great. Tell us a little bit, if you want. Do you want to go through your team and talk about your folks that work with you? So
Yeah, I'd love to.
maybe a little bit of background on each one. And you got a fantastic team.
Yeah, well, I won't cover all of them, but especially the local people.
Right.
Laura Vandenberg is on our team. Laura's just a really gifted communicator. Most people know her through Hawkeye Sports.
Right.
So
She's
if
on
you go to a
TV.
Hawkeye game, you'll see Laura.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a special person. We have so much respect for her and Matt. And then Mike O'Connell, who know real well.
Played at Regina, went
Played
to Iowa
City,
State.
Regina, played football at Iowa State. I was a
D-back.
pastor in Omaha, but he'll speak 10, 20 times a year for us, and he'll coach a handful of people. So there's Mike O'Connell, very gifted communicator. Kenyon Murray is another local guy who's on our team. So Kenyon, is long track record in sales, actually. Played basketball at University of Iowa now. Chris and Keegan.
Right.
Chris will get drafted into the NBA, and Keegan plays for the Sacramento Kings. So they've got a cool family story.
Yeah. And then his daughter's plays.
And
right?
then,
and he coaches his daughter in high school.
Coaches his daughter's team. Kenyon's got the craziest life. I mean, he'll have, Chris will play a college game for Iowa. Then I'll watch Keegan that night on TV for the Kings. And then the next day he's got to coach McKenna's high school basketball. But him and Michelle manage that so well.
Yeah.
I mean, they are just amazing parents, present with their kids. I mean, and those kids are all good kids.
Yeah,
they're not just athletes; they're good people.
I don't know his daughter, but Chris and Keegan, well-mannered,
kind,
great athletes,
humble,
kind. I don't know Kenyon, but he's done a great job with these kids.
Doing a great job.
Wonderful job.
Yeah, he's a dear friend.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. And then, Ryan Leake would be another. I think Ryan is a top 5 communicator on the planet. If you get a chance, go check out Ryan Leake.
Huh.
Unbelievable keynote speaker. So anyway, we're blessed to have a bunch, just like you. You got a bunch of good people around you.
Right.
Got a chance to meet Austin, and so takes a good team.
What if you're talking to a leader or a company, and they said, Jordan, we want you to come out and talk about goals. Tell us your thoughts or how you discuss goals with people, either individually or company-wide, or coaches or players or whatever you want to talk about. But goals to me are important. Yeah. If you don't have goals, you just wander around. You're not accomplishing. You're not accountable, and you never get anywhere. So as an entrepreneur, I've always found you got to have specific goals, and you got to really get after it to make those happen. And I think that's important, especially I think for anybody. Whether it's financial, whether it's physical, whether it's athletic, whatever it is, you have to have goals. Can you tell us a little bit how you approach goals and how you teach and goal setting?
We spend a lot of time on vision. So we're going to talk about goals. It starts with vision. Michael Hyatt famously said, without a vision, people drift. and no one drifted to a destination they intended to be at. So you got to have a real clear vision of where you're going. And then you got to communicate the vision. We always tell leaders, if you're not exhausted with the vision, if you don't feel like you've totally worn it out, then you're not there yet. In fact, you're probably about halfway there once you start feeling that way. So I think talking about the future, talking about where you're headed, talking about why you're doing it, that's the start of it. I think a lot of companies try to set their goals. They'll start talking about metrics and what they want to produce or how many deals they want to close, but they really haven't set the vision. And you can't set goals without setting a vision. So I think it starts for us, a lot of vision work with teams, spend a lot of time talking about why are you doing what you're doing? And then also making sure that people are weighing in on that. It's not just the boss's job or the leader's job to set the vision. Got to get buy-in from people.
Right.
Where people weigh in, they'll buy in. But you got to get them to weigh in. It's got to be a collective vision.
How do you get them to weigh in? A lot of times at a meeting, they're looking at the owner or the leader saying, well, he's telling them we got to do X. Yeah, it's what you want to do. How do you get that out of them? Is it
a lot of conversation and feedback, way more conversation and feedback. We work with a lot of leaders specifically on the art of feedback. How many questions are you asking? Leadership's more about asking questions than it is giving answers. So many leaders, and I'm guilty too, you want to walk a room and say, this is how we're doing it. We're doing X, Y, and Z,
Right.
and this is where we're headed. And it was like, wait a minute, you got a team of 20 people here or 100 people. And have you ever asked them what they want or why they show up coming to work?
Right.
Does the vision mean anything to them? I mean, it means something to you because you run the deal.
Right.
You're in charge of the organization. It might not mean anything to them.
Right.
And if it doesn't mean anything to them, they're not going to work as hard. They're not going to be invested. They're not going to stay with you. They're not going to do the same quality of work. So vision is a team sport. And we got to get more people involved in crafting the vision. Doesn't mean that you have to listen to every single thing that they say, because you might, I'd say, we're not doing that. That didn't even make any sense.
Yeah.
But you at least got to give them a voice and an opportunity to speak into it. Vision's a team sport.
So back to the Montgomery companies. What's your vision for the Montgomery companies maybe this year and the next 5 to 10 years? Or just, I don't know if you want to share it, but give me your long-term vision and goals for the Montgomery companies.
For the first time in my life, I'll answer that. I have goals. But I feel like God's calling me to keep a really open hand right now.
Okay.
My whole life, you know this about me, Gary, my whole life, and part of what got me in trouble, I was 27 years old, is I was so caught up on the future. It's all I think about was where I'm going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, achievement, awards, success, money. And we have young kids. We got 4 young kids at home. And
what ages?
So you have a newborn, 5 months, and then a 3.5-year-old, and then 9, and then almost 12.
You're definitely busy.
So we're busy. Yeah, you remember those years? We're busy. So, and I just don't want to miss it. I work with so many leaders right now who are they're missing it at home.
Right.
And I don't always get it right, but I want to be present with my family and my kids. And so that's my main goal right now is just how can I be a world-class father and husband? Again, a lot of days I get that wrong, but I'm working really hard to make sure the main thing stays the main thing.
That's great because a lot of times when you get around hospice workers and you get around the elderly, they say, what do you regret most? And a lot of times it wasn't the money, it wasn't the fancy cars, the houses, or whatever else you accumulated. Yeah. It was time spent with friends and family. And I should have spent more time with family. That's usually what they talk about because they can't go back.
That's right.
You can't go back. So it's hard to manage. It's hard to juggle. Yeah. And you're going to miss some things. But and then with kids, they're going to remember you playing catch. Yeah. They're going to remember maybe you read to them or not. They're not going to remember about a new car or you bought them this new bicycle. They're going to remember just the time you spent with them. So those are some things that as an old person that I can tell you that, and it sounds like you're doing it. I'm so excited to hear that the younger generation with kids and bringing them up right and spending time with them. That's one of the most important things you can do with what you and your wife are doing.
I think it is. I just think parenting's a unique leadership role because nobody ever will be dad but you.
Right.
Nobody ever be mom but you. And somebody else will be the coach, the mentor, the boss, the manager, but only we get to be mom or dad. So that's important to me. And then, of course, we want to have more impact and expand the business. Would love to speak more, coach more, empower more leaders, equip and train more people. I mean, that's certainly part of the goal. But if we don't win at home first,
Right.
none of that really matters.
That's great. Well, listen, I'll tell you what, it's been a joy to have you here. I'm glad that you opened up. I'm glad to hear more about the Montgomery companies. And if you folks don't know much about Montgomery companies, the website's just
MontgomeryCompanies.com.
Pretty simple.
Yep.
So check it out. It's great inspiration, and it's been fun. So Jordan, again, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. It's fantastic.
Well, thank you. And I love, I want to say this on the record, with as busy as you are and as many things as you have going on, you haven't stopped learning,
right,
and you haven't stopped serving. And I think this podcast is part of that for you. I think you get juice out of connecting, learning, growing, developing. So John Wooden, I'll leave our audience with this because this quote embodies your leadership. John Wooden said, "It's what you learn after you know it all that counts."
Right.
And so here you are, having had all this success and you've achieved so much, and you're saying, I got more to do, more to learn. And so I love that about you, Gary, and I want to say thanks for having me.
I appreciate it and I enjoy it. Thank you.